Welcome to Soul Care, a time to be together, a time to find a little connection. Today, more people live alone than ever before in America. Single-family homes are on the rise, and it's a trend. And now, in this pandemic, I think everybody feels somewhat alone. Of course, being alone isn't the same as being lonely. And being alone is not necessarily a bad thing. We can choose to be alone. This last spring, I chose to be alone to do some writing. So I went to a cabin by the ocean and I left all my schedules and responsibilities behind. It was quite freeing to be able to just choose when to get up, what to eat, whether to take a walk, where to sit and write, how long to write, when to take a break and get a cup of tea, when to take another walk, when to stretch and exercise, when to rest. There was a great freedom. I've almost never been alone in my life for any period of time, and it was a good experience. I recommend it if you are never alone to stop and choose a time to experience what it's like. Being lonely, though, is different from being alone. Loneliness is about wishing for relationship, about missing having a partner or a friend. It may be a feeling of being unloved. Loneliness is not a good feeling. Like Charlie Brown in the Peanuts comic strip. Here he's talking to Lucy, and Charlie Brown says, "I've come to the conclusion that there's nothing worse than being unloved." Lucy says, "Well, how about being lost in the woods? That's a lot worse. Wow." And Charlie Brown says, "Well, that's a strange comparison, and I'm not sure that Oh, yeah? Well, let me show you." So Lucy takes Charlie by the hand and leads him off into the woods. "There, you just stand there in those trees for a while, and you'll see what I mean." And then she departs. Along comes Linus, who says to Charlie Brown, "What in the world are you doing?" And Charlie Brown says, "No matter what anyone says, it's much worse to be unloved than to be lost in the woods." Linus turns to go, and as he's going, he says, "Sometimes I think you've been lost in the woods all your life, Charlie Brown." Actually, it's kind of peaceful. Being alone is kind of peaceful, unless you don't want to be alone. And then it's lonely. If you miss someone, or if you don't feel like you really belong, then that's loneliness. In the American culture, we used to be more connected than we are today. In small town America, people knew the name of everyone on their street for sure, if not everyone in the whole town. And people went to church. Imagine that. Some say that the reason our nation is so divided politically is that we really don't have a tribe to belong to, and we seek belonging in our lives. We want connection, and so we make a connection, but it's either left or right, and then our culture is polarized by our political divide. We have so much tension between the poles that we've seen in this presidential election campaign, how tense life is. During this pandemic, Many people are isolated. Everyone is somewhat isolated in quarantine. And many people, though, are reaching out. I've noticed that people are reaching out to older folks with offers to go shopping, or with little gifts or phone calls to see, well, how are you doing? I know you must be alone. And especially when we have a heat wave or smoke or fire danger, people are reaching out to older folks and asking if they need anything. These acts of kindness are so welcome and lovely. But I think another group of people is being ignored. It's our younger adults who are also very alone and quite lonely. These people are teenagers or students or young working adults, young professionals who live alone, who are single, and they cannot go out. They're working from home and they're living alone. And it can be very lonely. These are people at a stage in their lives when developmentally they would like to be seeking connections that are meaningful and long-term. They would like to be choosing careers and choosing life partners. They would like to be settling in with others with commitment. That's just not happening now. It's not possible. And so this is a difficult and lonely time for young adults. My kids tell me it's really pretty weird now, this online dating scene where you can't get together with anybody. It's very strange. It's almost not worth trying, they tell me. This creates loneliness when we don't feel there's any way to reach out and meet people. In fact, depression and suicide are on the rise in the US today. Drug and alcohol abuse are also on the rise, such that the average lifespan is decreasing in the last few years in our country. We are experiencing deaths from despair. Truly, we need each other. Jesus shares with us how we need to be alone, but we also need to be together. In the Gospel of Luke, we hear how he went away and then came back. Listen to these words from chapter 5. Now during those days, Jesus went out to the mountain to pray, and he spent the night in prayer to God. And when day came, he called his disciples and chose 12 of them, whom he also named apostles. Simon, whom he named Peter, and his brother Andrew, and James, and John, and Philip, and Bartholomew, and Matthew, and Thomas, and James, son of Alphaeus, and Simon, who was called the Zealot, and Judas, son of James, and Judas Iscariot. And then with these men, Jesus came back down to where the people were waiting. And the people listened to him, and he healed them, and he blessed them, and he talked to them about loving one another, even loving one's own enemies. You see, he needed people to begin his life work. He needed to be surrounded with peers, and then he was able to be effective with the crowds. We need time alone, and surely then we need time together. Perhaps we need to use our time alone in a better way right now. We have plenty of time alone. Perhaps we need to learn to be more productive and more positive with our alone time, to be more intentional. And we need time with others, and we need to be intentional about that. We need to reach out to call people, call a friend, close or distant, call a relative we haven't seen for some time. You can be in connection online or on the telephone as well as any time, even though we are isolated in our homes. We can create book groups or support groups. We can create new ways to communicate. I'm alone, you're alone, let's be together. It's that simple. We can have dinner dates. You can Invite someone to share an evening with you. It's actually pretty easy. You don't have to clean your house. You don't have to cook for anybody else. Just grab something to eat from the refrigerator and sit down and Zoom and have a meeting, which is a social gathering just for fun. It's not the same as being together, but it's good. It's the best we have. Or you can call the church or any faith community that you're drawn to. Call and say simply, I'd like to talk to someone. Call and say, I wonder if there's a group that I could join. And then you can invite other people to do the same thing. Invite others to connect with you or to connect with a faith community. Nobody has to be lonely during this time. And you can rely on God. You know, when you pray to God, you can do it out loud. Even if you're alone, just talk out loud in your house or on your walk. Talk to God about what's on your heart, about your concerns, about your needs, about your longings, about your loneliness. Feel like you are not alone. And there is a line to call. It's the NAMI line, N-A-M-I, NAMI. And the number to call is 800 950 6264. That's 950 6264. That's a number you can call. Don't hesitate to call it. If you're feeling alone and despairing and just you don't know what to do with yourself, call and connect with someone who can listen and care. Nobody needs to be alone. Or you can call Asbury United Methodist Church in Livermore, where I'm the Minister of Pastoral Care. Call and ask to talk with me, and I'll call you back if I get the message, and we'll connect. Doesn't matter where you live, we can connect. You know, Charlie Brown doesn't smile a lot in Peanuts unless he's with Snoopy the dog. Most of the time he's feeling desperately unhappy. But now and again we see him enjoying the simple pleasure of Snoopy's companionship. Sitting under a tree, Snoopy there with his dog and Charlie Brown together are saying, "Here we are, two old friends, sitting together, sharing a sandwich," Charlie Brown says. "I can tell you, it just doesn't get any better than this." Snoopy's thinking, it doesn't. Take care.